does the American Jewish community look like in the year 2020? Let's find out. Hey everybody, welcome to Face to Face. Hey Rabbi, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Rabbi David. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So the question is, what does the Jewish American community look like in the year 2020? We have a new, well, it's not really new anymore. We're a little late to the game, but it's new for this year.
Just got published.
It just got published a couple months ago or a month ago, May 11th. Exactly 1 month ago. There you go. May 11th, Jewish Americans in 2020, how U.S. Jews are culturally engaged, increasingly diverse, politically polarized, and worried about anti-Semitism. So this is the infamous Pew report, which has, these Pew reports have sort of animated Jewish thought leaders and Jewish organizations every time they come out. The attention we give them is sort of unbelievable. And we wanted to kind of jump in and unpack some of what we learned from this report and some of the reflections that we've seen. So any sort of big picture, off the cuff takeaways that you want to start us out with here?
Oddly enough, the takeaway that I want us to have is that there was no takeaway. Well, I wouldn't say that there are no takeaways, but there's nothing so surprising. There have been Pew studies where people have schried gewalt after them, and it's not the case here. There really were no surprises, no bombshells. And
is it really? It's just more of the same. More of the same, you think?
Well, what I think happened is the last Pew study was in 2013, and there were some things that came out there, but that in those 7 years, things have kind of smoothed out, and that the trends that were observed in 2013 have really stabilized, and that we are now at a point of, I don't want to say a new normal. I hate that term because I think it just changes. There's constant change, but in this case, there are not big things that came out of it. That's not to say that there aren't lots of things for us to talk about, which I think we'll probably get to today, but that this is an opportunity for us to reflect, to think about what might the Jewish community look like going forward, to understand better the realities that we live in, and then start to be planful about it.
Yeah. So I'm one of the things I would like to get to, if you're open to it, is some of the data on movement within the movements. Now, I proudly work here at a Reform institution, but I'm also proudly not really any of them. I've always called myself an under-constructionist because I'm always sort of under construction and becoming. You are very, very engaged and involved with the institutionalized reform movement. And so I would love to get to that if you're open to it. But I would like to actually start with sort of a big picture question for me that I had when I was reading it. And that is the question of religion, right? Judaism as a religion. So 27% of Jews, this is a really interesting number. 27% of Jews say that they are Jews of no religion, and 73% say that they're Jews by religion. But then, if you look down, I know I'm scrolling really fast, sorry about that. If you go further down into the study, only 21% of Jewish adults say that religion is very important to them. There seems to be a disconnect, at least to me, about what we mean when you call ourselves or talk about the word religion, right? People who don't go to a synagogue, at least monthly, 67% don't go because they're not religious, but 70-something% say that they're Jews by religion. So maybe I'm just getting lost in the language here, and there's a difference between religion and religious, but I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I think you are absolutely correct. It is a question of definition, and keep in mind those definitions are hard, and they were imposed upon us. Right? That when we came into certainly into European culture, when we came into American culture, we were foisted upon us definitions like nation, like ethnicity, like race, like people. And the truth is that Judaism is all of those and none of those. That Judaism is not just a religion, but it is also a nation. It is a people. I don't like to think about Judaism as a race, but we are all races. And so the question of identity is a challenging one. The fact that, and this is really the one that everybody keeps pointing to. If there's one of the statistics in this Pew study, it's this idea that whatever 27% or a third of the Jews in America claim to be Jews of no religion. The truth is, like you, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I read somewhere, if you go back 100 years and you have all of these atheist kibbutzniks living in Israel, all right, who at the end of their work week would celebrate Shabbat with kiddush and whatever else. Were they religious? Were they not religious? What does that mean? Right? And I think it's more helpful for us to look at how Jews express their religion, right? And recognize that we are seeing, I don't know whether a resurgence, but we are seeing a strength in Jewish identity. It's just not in the way that we have normally come to understand Judaism, which is largely affiliation with a church, meaning affiliation with a synagogue.
Right. And I was going to say that for you and I, who work in a synagogue, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this study, even though, like you said, there's nothing necessarily new here, is a continuation of something that should be concerning for us. If those of us who work in the institutional Jewish world don't do something when we see this data. I mean, I'll just show you quickly. So this is Jewish adults' religion is very important to them, somewhat important. But then when it comes to religious services, and the truth is, synagogues do so much more than weekly services, and in many ways that remains our focus. In many ways,
yeah, that's the litmus test as to whether you are participating. And keep in mind that's not even our definition, meaning yours and mine at Temple Sinai, but rather a self-definition, because that seems to be the mode of thinking for people who define themselves as Jews. Right? Am I religious means, do I go to services? Right? And Judaism is so much more than that.
Right. Even, so here, I mean, if you look, 52% of Jewish adults seldom or never go to synagogue, and that's only 2% more than 50% nationwide. I mean, what does that say about the role of the synagogue? I guess.
Yes. Okay. I look at this as part of the wider trend across the United States through all religions that identity formation is not necessarily happening in the synagogue, or for that matter, in the family. right? That where what do I think is one of the major things that we are seeing that we can point to in this study, is um, all of the changes are stemming from the idea that we live, um, that the reality that we live in is one of hyper individualism, right? That free choice, empowered free choice.
Yeah.
And so people are creating their own identities, right? And they have the tools via the internet, via whatever, to be able to create that, in a very individualistic way. So, whereas when I grew up, my Jewish identity was created by my parents in my home and my synagogue, all right, youth group, etc. Okay, institutional Judaism, and now I can create a Judaism that works for me, right? uh, Essentially on my own. Now, you and I can argue that that is missing something. That there's
Well, would you? Or I mean, would you? Is that because
yeah,
I don't know.
I
I
would
mean,
argue that. I would argue that.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think that, Judaism, on a deserted island, is not full as full of Judaism as one could have. I think Judaism lived within community. Now, if you took my hyper individualistic and attached it to, a bunch of my, peers, and we were doing that and creating it ourselves, then yeah, I think, where's the synagogue? It's not. It
So
doesn't necessarily need to be there as long as I'm willing to do the work. Where it falls down, where this individualism falls down, is that, most people aren't going to learn themselves, aren't going to study themselves, aren't going to create it themselves. They need somebody else to help them, and that's where
okay,
I think the synagogue should be.
but I would perhaps argue that I think I would argue it a little differently because that argument doesn't work for me. That they won't necessarily do the work themselves, and the reason it doesn't work for me is because even with us doing the work, it's not getting to the intended audience. It's not hitting the target, right? So I wonder if the answer is not they're not going to seek it out or they're not going to do the work, and so we have to do it for them. Maybe the answer is we have to build an ecosystem. We have to think differently
Of co-creation.
of co-creation.
Yes.
By the way, I have to say I had never thought about identity building and the identity creation piece of it. You're right. I mean, I was so formed by my synagogue growing up in the 70s and 80s. I'd never thought of it that way. That I had always bemoaned the fact that what do people need a synagogue for? They need it for life cycle events. But the truth is that that's not what they need it for. They need it for that identity creation. And all right, so then how do we do that when the model is what was that famous article, Blockbuster versus Netflix, right? When the model is we're still kind of, and not just us, I mean synagogues, Judaism in general is still kind of Blockbuster in their mindset. How do we move to that co-creation piece?
Yeah. If I had that answer,
Yeah, I know. Fair enough. Yeah.
I think there were a couple of other interesting things that came out of, the Pew study. I think that, the interesting, statements that people have had about, how American Jews are becoming less Zionist, or that our relationship with Israel is somehow,
Yeah.
going the way of the Mohicans. It was interesting to see that the case. 82% of American Jews say that Israel is very important to their identity. I mean, that's astronomical.
It really
Okay.
is.
And true, many Jews, including me, on plenty of occasions, are critical of Israel, the state of Israel's policies. But the average Jew is, they're connected, right? They, even when they are critical, there's a sense of connection, and that there was this concern that if we allowed for criticism, that somehow that would be, the spelling the start of the end, and I think that I think we have to do work, but I think that we can have a much more sophisticated connection to Israel that includes loving critique, without fearing that the relationship is going to fray at the ends.
Yeah, there is, though, a difference between in ages, right? So so older folks are much more attached to Israel,
For sure.
67% versus 48 for 18 to 29-year-olds. I mean, sort of across the board, we see that age discrepancy there, and
Right.
so in some ways, I wonder if the concern about our connection to Israel isn't generally about the Jewish community, but really about the next generation of Jews.
I
that
think
are,
I think that's true. Uh, I think there was an interesting piece that that talked about how Jews are connecting with other Jews, and that the that we live here in South Florida, in Aventura, North Miami Beach, where there's such a rich and deep Jewish population, of all shapes and sizes and colors and stripes, that what was interesting to me was seeing that Jews in other communities are not connecting with other Jews, that everybody may be fine with Israel, but they're not fine with their neighbor. All right, that
is
Orthodox
that
Jew.
is that a denominational thing, or that did you see, or
I
a
Yeah,
political
I did see
thing,
that.
or
Yeah.
okay,
All right. I mean, in terms of, there, I think our community is becoming sorted, meaning in different camps, divided, not only by their denominational affiliation or their religious observance, but also their political.
yeah,
You look at the ends of the spectrum. Don't quote me on it, but something like 75% of Orthodox Jews would define themselves as Republican, versus flip to Reform Jews, 75% of them would see themselves as Democrats. But where I think I'm more sad is that we are not seeing a connection. Jews aren't being connected with other Jews across the spectrum. I have nothing in common with my Orthodox neighbor, or the Orthodox neighbor says, I have nothing in common with my Reform friend, or I don't even know that person. That somehow we may run parallel, but we don't run together.
I remember, was it 1993? Was that the big Pew study that got everyone in a tizzy about intermarriage? I forget what year it was. I think 93.
I don't
I could
remember
be
the
wrong.
year, but yeah,
In
I
any case,
remember. Yeah.
yeah, I remember when that came out. I mean, there was a lot of hysteria about it, but also some very thoughtful responses. And there were a couple responses that I thought were very thoughtful. One of them was, congratulations, right? Congratulations that intermarriage is now more than 50%, interfaith marriage, because this is exactly what we wanted. We wanted full integration into American society, and this is what full integration looks like. Well, now we're looking at interfaith marriage up to 72% amongst non-Orthodox married Jews. And so I would just say one other thing, that one of the things that I thought about when the study was first came out about interfaith marriage, and al achat kama v'kama even more so now, is that we could be approaching, if we're not there already, another moment like when Judaism and Christianity split. Judaism, as I understand it, Judaism and Christianity split primarily because someone from this group said, I can't marry someone from that group. And someone from this group said, I won't marry someone from that group. We're going to have, and again, we probably already do, a group of Jews that will not marry another group of Jews because they are the children of interfaith relations that may or may not have gone through traditional conversion or what have you.
I don't argue that at all. I think I think it may not be in our lifetimes, but maybe in my children's lifetime, where there will be Orthodox Judaism and there will be non-Orthodox Judaism. Right. Whatever you want to call non-Orthodox Judaism. Right. Where I actually want to come back to since you brought up intermarriage. No, you brought up intermarriage. What is interesting, is that when that statistic was first brought to the fore and everybody was like, oh my God, the Jewish community is going to, I don't remember the percentage, but I'm going to say something, do not quote me on this, something like 20% of kids in interfaith marriages were being raised
as
Jewish.
Jews. Yeah.
Okay, now, what is the percentage? This is shocking to me. 70%, I think, of interfaith Jews, of families in interfaith are raising their kids Jewishly. Now, I would say that's a success.
It's interesting. Look at the headline. It's so interesting. Intermarried Jewish parents much less likely to be raising their children Jewish. Well, perhaps, but 70-something% is sort of an amazing number.
Right. Look, if you've got two Jews, I will stand by the statement that that's the ideal. But I don't think that, I think we have to be realistic.
Yeah.
I don't think we can bury our head in the sand, which is exactly what the Reform movement did now 40 years ago, when they recognized that intermarriage is here. Right. It's here to stay. So we can either deny it, push those away, and reject, but we're not going to win the war doing it that way. Or we can, in some way, bring them in, welcome them, help them, support them, guide them. And now we're seeing the fruits of those labors.
Yeah. I've always felt like we've done conversion. I'm going down a rabbit hole here. I've always felt like we've done conversion the wrong way. That we've done it the Shammai way. Someone wants to come and convert, and we drill them, and we make them take classes, and we make them pay money, and they have to jump through hoops, as opposed to Hillel, who said, "You're in, welcome. Now let's learn." And I feel like that, in some ways, is reflective of the change, or a possible change in approach to interfaith couples, right? One approach is, that's not the ideal, and so we're going to keep it at least at arm's distance. The other one, and we're going to try and kind of push you in this direction. The other approach is, you're standing in front of me. Full stop. Welcome. I love you.
Right.
whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever you look like, you're here right now seeking out a Jewish experience. Let's go on that journey together.
I Rabbi David, I think you are pointing to a change in my own feelings about this from when I was ordained 25 years ago to now. That I'm not sure that my way, which has been supportive, but there are certain things that I can't do. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the only way.
So I'm keeping an eye on the clock. We're reaching half
Right.
an hour here, and I want to be mindful of your time. Can I? Is it okay if I circle back to the movement, the affiliation question? Because I'm curious what you have to say about it. So Reform Judaism increased by 2% over the last study. No particular branch increased. Conservative went down a point, which I'm surprised it didn't go down more.
More.
Orthodox went down, which is very surprising to me, by 1 point.
Yeah.
And other branches went down a couple points.
Well, this is what I meant by I think stabilizing. Um, I don't, there wasn't anything really uh, earth shaking
Right.
there. One piece of this is, you know, that the Orthodox, if you look at it at first glance, the Orthodox, particularly the Haredi population, appears to be growing a little bit, but I think that that's actually deceiving. Right, the growth in the Orthodox community is due to high birth rates. Right? Orthodox Judaism, like the other movements, are struggling to retain their own. Within Orthodoxy, a small portion of Orthodox Jews leave the fold, and a small number become Orthodox. You're not seeing a great wave of orthodoxy growing, despite what we may experience in our own backyard here.
Yeah.
I don't think that plays out in the rest of the world, in the rest of the country.
What's happening? So you said earlier that you imagine that perhaps in your children's lifetime we'll have sort of an Orthodox, or I would maybe say traditional, and then progressive Judaism.
Sure.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of movement in Reform and conservative Judaism. Is it just I would have expected more of either a shift or a merge or a something. Is it just taking longer? Are people holding on, or what do you think is happening there?
I think the Look, that's part of a longer question of movement-based Judaism. I'm not convinced that we're going to have movement-based Judaism, or the movements are going to coalesce. That's going to take a long time because institutions are just by their very nature conservative with a little c. They don't like to vote themselves out of existence, right? But there's going to be things like like a pandemic, which is going to cause great disruption, and that's going to force, as it has within our own community, synagogues to close or synagogues to merge, and a merger between there are lots of mergers between Reform and conservative synagogues, congregations, and it may take a generation before nobody, are you conservative, are you Reform?
Right.
When they first come together, everybody's, I'm where I am, and you can be where you are, and fine, we'll share the building, but our kids aren't going to care.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. So, Rabbi, you're going to Israel, I understand.
I am going to Israel. That's if people are watching, we'll come back for our next face-to-face and talk about what I think is going to happen on Sunday, which is the change government. I don't want to jinx it, but we have a on the schedule a very, very high level meeting with some people. I won't even say who, but to talk about the new government.
When do you leave?
Sunday, and I'll be back Friday morning. Sunday
It's a quick
evening
trip.
to Friday morning. Yes, a
And you're
very,
going,
very quick trip.
and you're going with a group of rabbis from Miami-Dade?
Indeed, and some from Broward and some from Palm Beach.
Ah,
So
the Tri-County.
really,
Beautiful.
really nice group, and we're looking forward to it.
Great.
So,
Nasiya Tova. Have a safe, meaningful,
Thank you.
wonderful trip. Wonderful trip.
Thank you.
And
All right.
you
We'll
out of
see you
here?
on face to face.
Yeah, we'll see you next time, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Good.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Bye.
Bye.